So and forgive us for this, for the presentation, we presented Arizona DDD Council last week, right, Jenna? And so this is why we have this format at the time, but it's getting formatted to Raising Special Kids format soon. I'm sorry, guys, just give me a second. My kids are having a lockdown at school.
Oh no, Ceci, do you want me to kind of jumpstart it for you?
Yes, please, Jana. Let me just make sure everything's okay.
Yeah, make sure, definitely. So as Ceci shared, we got this particular new training. Its maiden voyage was last week. Ceci and I presented it for our DD network and an Employment First initiative. It kind of kicked off a series of webinars. And what was kind of cool about it is it really sets the stage. The intent is to give families more to think about when their kids are little, about thinking about having higher expectations for their youth and thinking about work, even when they're just graduating from early intervention. So that's kind of the background for the presentation, or for the actual workshop. This is the agenda within the workshop. We talk about what is a great life. We understand what setting a vision looks like, understand expectations and how expectations and reality, there's this huge gap between there, and then the delicate balance between having high expectations and appropriate expectations, the core components of a great life and how families can help. They're a critical piece of that, and then addressing concerns along the way. And today, despite having a disability, we all can have a great life, including jobs, recreation, independent living, furthering our education. You know, the disability often makes just very little difference to the quality of our life. Our world continues to change and develop in supporting individuals with disabilities and providing more of those really cool opportunities for growth, independence, making mistakes, learning from them, just having more experiences in life. And our hopes and dreams, they're likely to change and evolve for our children, just like they do for us, as you know, our kids are growing into adulthood. Are you okay, Ceci?
I am. I think everyone's going to be okay. Those things are just scary. You never know.
They're very scary. Yeah. So only if you're good or if you need another minute, let me know.
No, that's okay. We can go on. I mean, I know we don't have time to go through this whole presentation, and there's a facilitator guide that goes along with this presentation. So we're going to share all those materials after this. But I'll kind of give you the gist, and we'll pause at some really great points in the presentations. So what does a great life look like? You can look at the pictures, and we kind of talk about all of the different opportunities and how it's kind of a parent's responsibility to give opportunity for our youth. And the pictures show recreation and meal preparation and friendships. So it kind of gives you a whole picture of what a good life can look like. Okay, next slide. I think Jenna spoke on this before, but we're really wanting to push how formal services are not always a long-term option. And so we start talking about things that we can do at home, soft skills that parents can help foster. Next slide. This is a really good slide. I like it. Jenna, when we presented last week, gave some really great examples. And this is where we talk about expectations and having high expectations. In the facilitator's guide, it'll give an example, and we always ask that the facilitator kind of give a personal example, because we know that sometimes as parents, we don't always have high expectations. And I'll just give kind of a funny and quick example here. My son, who is a musician, just had his TSW teacher tell him that's not realistic. That's not a really good job opportunity for him. And his grandfather's a musician and his great grandfather's a musician. And so he's looking at like the technology part. And I just thought sometimes we can get stuck in these spaces, and we really need to pivot and look at having high expectations and not just thinking of like a rock and roll star on a stage. You know, a musician could be many things. They can be putting music to movies, and they could be recording, and they could be doing all sorts of things. So just having high expectations and checking ourselves also as parents and as teachers and mentors and so on. Next slide. We talk a little bit about low expectations and why we have some of these low expectations, and some of them are just learned and they're inherent, and you know, it's things that we've just been told over and over. Next slide. The importance of having high expectations. This is just, again, reinforcing how we need to use positive language, helping to avoid restrictive programs. Also, I know this isn't effective for everyone, but some of the examples that we had given was comparing maybe another person, another neurotypical young person in your life. For example, my daughter is 18 months older than my son, and I always will ask myself, would I let Ashley do this? You know, would it be okay for her to do this? Because I want to make sure that I'm not, you know, putting my son in a box because of his diagnosis. Next slide. This is a time to pause and ask for a little bit back, a little bit of feedback from the audience. So what is your vision for a great life for your family member? And then what don't you want for your family member's future? So obviously we can ask them to put it in the chat. If it's a small enough group, they will unmute. And it's kind of really eye-opening when you start getting some of these responses back, because we're all sort of in the same spot. You know, we don't want our young person to be isolated. We want them to have a community and friends and feel connected. And what we don't want is also very similar. We want to make sure no one's taking advantage of them, you know, that they're happy. So this is kind of a really important piece, I think, because it resonates with the audience, that we're all sort of feeling and thinking the same thing. Next slide. This slide, we talk about the charting course, and we give the link on how to use some of these tools. The great thing is that if we're talking about some of these life trajectories and things that we envision would be a good life for our youth and what we don't want, if we're working early on, we can help navigate and we can help teach and we can help fill in the gap. So this is kind of a really great tool. And if you're starting earlier, these are, you know, you can see where the strengths lie, where the weaknesses lie, and we can keep going from there. Next slide. Foundations of a great life. We go over, these are the, is it five foundations: education, employment, independent living, community connection, and personal choice. Next slide. From here on, every slide kind of just goes into specifics of those 5 core topics. Education, we talk about the importance of inclusion and what parents can do to make sure that that's happening early on. Next slide. Employment, everyone can work. You know, we talk a little bit about sort of the common thread of when you're out in the, you know, in a party or an event, and it's kind of like, it's one of the first questions that people are asked. So what do you do? Where do you work? It's a part of our culture. So it's important that we have work. Next slide. Why should your family member work? We talk about the importance of it, but we also talk about what that can look like. And it doesn't have to look the same for everyone. Work can mean all sorts of different things. Next slide. How families support employment. So this goes back to some of the soft skills, setting expectations, some of the things that we can teach them. I always like to touch a little bit about when we talk about time management. All of our youth has a phone. I mean, I feel like everybody's got a phone by them. There's so many technology pieces that we can use to help support our youth with some of these things that are a little bit more difficult for them. Teaching real things, chores at home. So next slide. What is success? So this is a really good slide also to talk about that success can look completely different for each individual. And again, we want to have high expectations, and we also want to praise for the success that they do have. It's important. Hours worked, tasks, tolerance, recognize and celebrate progress. Again, this is going to look different for everyone. Next slide. Independent living, I know that this group has talked a ton about some of these things, specifically transportation. It's a big issue all over the country for a lot of the youth and young adults that we work with. But these are things that parents and anyone working with youth can consider early on. So if this is a big barrier, how can we start putting in things in place earlier to make sure that we are recognizing that these are obstacles and we can start addressing some of these obstacles early on? Transportation, and I know that this is really easy to say out loud and it's not always the case for everyone. There's bus systems in most cities. And so understanding how that works and teaching that to our youth early on. And I know a lot of our transportation systems have those kinds of trainings. Financial literacy, that's not happening at school. Like sometimes we all expect that to be happening. Then what can we do at home, with chores and allowance and so forth. Healthy habits, really important as well. Some things that, funny enough, it's one of my son's HAB goals, healthy habits, eating healthy and exercise. And those are important things that not only, again, should sort of these formal services be helping with, it's something that we can help with it as well as at home. And housing, understanding the options and everything that's available out there and how important that is to feel independent and part of the transition into adulthood. Next slide. Community connections. This is really important. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the fears that some of the families had was loneliness, isolation. So these pieces are important. I always give my little personal, bit here too. I had my son volunteering early on, well, in the last 2 years at the church. He does the sound system and he does the slides for the worship. And while it was really hard and it took, in my mind, I thought this is something that maybe his HAB provider is going to be doing, or this is something that's going to be done at work, at school. This is something that took me many phone calls, many visits, and I could have easily, my husband said I would have quit the second time. That the young man that was supposed to meet us there didn't show up, and I kept pushing because I knew it was important. And I'm so glad I did. He would get out of the car in the beginning and he would pace back and forth in front of the car, even though he had to walk in, and it would take him probably 2 or 3 minutes, which seemed like an eternity before he would walk in and, do what he had to do. And here we are 2 years later. I can't give you an exact time frame of when that switch happened, but he now feels like he's part of that community. He jumps out of the car and says, "Bye, Mom." And he's in there and people are giving him fist pumps and, they know that, he might be off in a corner and not, having conversation with some of the other young people, but he's part of their community. They learn to love him just the way he is. And so this piece of community connection, I think, is really important and it's often overlooked. Next slide. Personal choice. This is interesting for me because I think sometimes we hear that parents can sometimes be an obstacle for letting our youth have personal choice. And it's a real balance, right? Knowing what's best for our young person and then letting them have some personal choice. So we really talk about letting them have some decisions and asking them the question and not making assumptions. Are we giving our young people the opportunity to direct their lives? And there is something to be said about having them say something that seems unrealistic to us, letting them have the opportunity to show us either that it is an option or that it's not, but they will have learned it on their own. No one's going to be there to say, no, this is not an option for you. So this is a really important piece that we always want to share with our parents. Next slide. This vision statement, again, this is one of those tools that we have a link for at the end of the presentation, something that can be built at home or at school. And it's a really great tool that can be used as a resume, but this is led by the youth. They're putting in their strengths, their areas of need for help, and their accomplishments and also what they want for life. And it's kind of cute. This is a very small print, but if I remember correctly, Andy has an idea of where he wants to work, and he wants to get married to Maggie, I think. And so this is his planning. And if we think about it, we've all had these sorts of plans, and sometimes they worked out and sometimes they didn't, and that's okay. but it's important that we give them the opportunity to make these choices. So this is a really great tool. And like I said, there's a link to where this can be made for each individual family. Next slide. Having questions or concerns is normal. Again, this is where we pause again. Is there anything that make you worried or concerned? The answers will come in the chat, and I love, again, to see that we all have sort of the natural concerns. Next slide. We talk about balance here. What slide are we on here, Jana? What number slide?
Jana, you're on mute, so I don't know if we.
Thank you. Number 23. Sorry, Sassy.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I love these pictures because it gives pause for everyone, and everyone gets to just sort of think about balance. But then there's no notes unless you're presenting. So 23, we talk about how systems of care can tend to be deficit focused, and how we want to make sure that we're working with the systems of care that is ability focused, and that we want to balance the strengths and abilities with deficits. So this is kind of a beautiful picture of perfect balance. The next slide. So the next slide is, obviously, this is a path. And so the world has predetermined milestones for humans. And we talk about how everybody's path is going to look a little bit different. It might take some people a little bit longer to take off, and some, a little bit quicker, but everyone's path is going to look a little bit different. And then next slide. So takeaways, set a vision for a great life, put your family member in a position to lead. Having questions and concerns is normal. Success looks different for everyone, and celebrate the small steps. We're hoping that with some of those pauses that we made and some of those opportunities for engagement with other families having the same thoughts, that it'll resonate. Next slide. And this is where we leave it for questions and concerns. Obviously, we went really, really quickly, but we wanted to share this. We felt like it was really important. These are all the resources that we went through, that the parents think a little bit outside the box, and that we start looking at something other than all of there's some wonderful, wonderful resources available to our youth. But there's things that we can be doing outside the box that will be really beneficial too. And if we're doing it a lot earlier on, it's just going to make for more success. So with that, I will, like I said, I will share this PowerPoint with you. I will share the facilitator guide, and I'm hoping that if you guys want to make this your own, that you might find that it's a useful tool. Again, and I hate to say this because I'm a parent, but we do often hear, especially from educators, well, the parent did this, or and it's difficult when we've advocated for so many years for our young person. And then there's that real transition of they know what's best for them. And we're thinking, do they really though? Because I've been doing all of this for so long. So this is just a really good training to help the parents pivot gently, and often when it's coming from another parent, it's taken in a little bit easier. So thank you for listening to our PowerPoint, and I know we rushed, but thank you very much. We appreciate it. And like I said, we will be sharing those resources, but we do have a lot of updates to share. So I'm going to pass it on to Sherelle.
Thank you, Sassy. That was a great presentation. So I'm looking forward to getting those materials and adapting them and utilizing them. So thank you for that. So in about 2 to 3 minutes, we're going to have Carigwin Parsons come on. She's going to, for the last couple of months, I've kind of been hinting around this comprehensive needs assessment that we're going to do. And so she's really going to talk a little bit about what that's going to look like. We've set some dates. We have one that's in person in Colorado. We have 2 that are virtual. And then kind of wanting the participation from parent centers. So Carigwin will have a survey for parent centers to fill out by the end of today, to fill out today, but to be due by May 2nd. And then we'll also have a survey that we want to give out to parents. So if you have parents that that will fill that out, and then getting the youth won't have the survey, they'll come to the in-person or virtual session. So we actually want to have a sit down kind of conversation with them. And so one thing that I want to do to kind of say, hey, parent centers, we need your help. We really want you to be engaged in this process, is to offer $200 to each parent center. That helps us to engage with not only you as a parent center, but your youth as well as parents. So the goal here is that we're going to get information that all parent centers in all the states will be able to utilize and kind of have an idea of what to use moving forward. So she'll come and talk a little bit about that. I want to put in a plug for our next community of practice. So right now, I know everyone's in the month of APRs and reports, and this year's kind of been kind of rushing really fast. And so in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month next month, I have been speaking with an art therapist, and she is going to come to our next community of practice, and we're just going to have a session where there's no expectations. We're going to do a little art therapy. She said we could use whatever we have. So if you have markers, crayons, pieces of paper, pens, like bring it with you. And we're just, or whoever staff that you guys want to bring from your centers, just to come and just have a day of relaxation and kind of just enjoy, find some balance, as Ceci talked about a little bit. So I'm excited for that. I hope that you're wanting to join and kind of take a break with us. Next week, you guys should have the invite for the College Our Way with Charmaine and Dylan Thanner. So if that is something that you're interested in participating in, would love to see you. Angela, I know that's literally the same time as the community of practice that you're doing. So I'm like, I know you won't be there. So I was like, oh man, I can't believe I did that. So my apologies for booking.
Well, and I do have the other community of practice, which I have to do while I'm in my meetings. And I was already I was like, well, if I miss Charmaine and Dylan, they're in my backyard. I can get Charmaine anytime I need to. So
yes.
yeah.
Awesome. And then there's another event opportunity coming up May 10th. So I'll send out an invite for this next week, but it's our outreach webinar. So we have 2 members from Big Brother Big Sisters in Atlanta who will be coming talking about how they do outreach to youth. And then Ceci has gotten us an organization, Hispanic organization in Arizona. They're part of the workforce organization. So they're going to be talking about how they engage and get youth to come to their organization. So this is just a way to help diversify our outreach and then just get some other pointers from people whose job it is to actually serve and engage youth to get that information. So I will send that invite out to you guys by tomorrow. So that's May 10th, and it will be from 2 to 3:30 is what I have it for, but it might be a little shorter than that. But Carigwin is here, so I'm kind of done with, say that again, Ann.
What time zone was the 2 to 3?
Oh, Mountain Standard Time. So yes. So if you're in California, it's an hour ahead, an hour before that. Yeah. So I'll send out that invite by tomorrow. But yes, thank you, Carigwin, for joining us.
You're welcome. It's good to see you all. Hi, everybody. Cheryl, you want me to jump in?
Yeah, go ahead. I've already kind of given a brief intro of why you're here, what we're doing. So yeah, we're ready for you.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for letting me join. My name is Carigwin Parsons, or CP, which tends to be the name people like to call me. So although Cheryl got it, so I mean, that's good. I am one of the founders of CM Consulting Group, and like I'm sure that Cheryl shared with you, we've been partnering with her for the last several months on the Project Power project, and gathering information, or at least starting to gather information for the youth needs assessment for youth in transition. And so here's what I will share with you. I've worked with Peak on a few different things, few different types of projects over the last year or so. I'm based in Louisville, Kentucky. I used to be in Las Vegas. So for 20 years, I was in Las Vegas. So I see Nevada represented on the call. So Rob and I used to live in Vegas, and we moved here about a month and a half ago. So I am on the East Coast now, or center of the country, but was in your region for a long time, and have worked with youth serving organizations across the country for the last 15 years, primarily with Big Brothers Big Sisters agencies, but have worked in schools and nonprofits for a really long time, and love the work we get to do. Part of why we were invited into, and I say we, Melissa is the M in CM Consulting. Part of why we were invited into this project is because we do lots of program reviews and needs assessment kind of work with organizations around the country. And we'd known Michelle, who's the executive director at Peak, for a long time. And so she's the one who first reached out to us when Peak was doing a military needs assessment. And then we got invited to partner with you all for this. I am not an expert in working with youth in transition. That's the work you all do. But what I do know really well is how to dig into data, dig into information, facilitate conversation, and learn from and with experts like you all. And so I've told Sherelle, I am never going to act as if I'm the expert in working with the youth and families that you all serve. But what I can do is be that outside objective reviewer who gets to come in and say, here's what it sounds like your families and the team members across the country are saying they need. So we're starting a project, as you all know, where we're talking through working with post-secondary transition youth and doing a needs assessment for them. And you all are kind of phase 2. This step today is phase 2 in our project. So Sherelle, are you comfortable with me just kind of walking through the steps of the project that we're going through? I don't want to be too redundant.
Yeah, no, you're
Okay.
good.
Okay. Let me pause first though. Anybody have any questions about what I've said so far before I just dive in? Okay. All right. Well, then let me just jump in. And I'm gonna, if you're okay with it, I'm gonna share my screen just so I can show you all what I'm looking at. So I'm gonna share a survey that Sherelle and I have worked on together, and you all get to fill the survey out. So I'm not going to go through all the questions, but what I am going to do is walk through with you the steps of the project that we're going through together. And so this is essentially kind of walking you through what Melissa and I have done so far, and then what we're going to continue to do over the next few months as we partner with Sherelle and with you all. So we had an opportunity to review all of the self-assessment feedback that the parent centers completed over in 2021, so towards the end of the year. We went through, looked at all of that information, and from that, because we did not want to be redundant, we created a staff survey, which is what you all are going to get at the end of this call. And I know Sherelle's also going to email out, but we created a staff survey that's specific to you and the parent centers that work with families and youth, to get some information about how much you're working with youth who are in transition, what needs you feel they have shared with you all, what families are expressing they need, and how well you feel like you provide those services and what you wish you could do more of. So you all are going to get a link to this survey today, and SurveyMonkey is saying it thinks it'll take about 9 minutes to fill it out. So it depends on how much you want to share with me. It might take you 15. There are some opportunities for you to provide comment. But after we gather your information, we're then going to create a parent survey and a survey for youth who are in that 15 to 26-year-old range. And Sherelle will work with you all to ask you to distribute that to families. Our goal is to have your information by early May. So this survey that we're looking at today, we're asking you if you'll fill it out for us by early May, and then we're going to review that, create and modify the parent and youth survey. Sherelle will be sending you all then links to those surveys so those can be distributed. And then, and one of the things I'll tell you we're thinking about is how we can, we may do a video version of a youth survey so we're thinking through like different ways to engage youth who maybe learn differently, need a different opportunity or a different way to share feedback or information. So we are thinking about that as well. And once we've gathered that information, we're going to use it to create some questions for a focus group, because essentially this whole project is about identifying what the needs of youth in transition are, if they're being met already by parent centers, and if they are, and what potentially funding in the future could go towards to create opportunity for those youth. So Sherelle and I are doing 2 virtual focus groups and I know she'll work with you all to figure out who the youth are who will attend. We may be able to identify that through the survey responses, but we'll do 2 sessions in early June. There'll be 90-minute sessions. And then we are also doing an in-person session in Denver in August, where we'll spend some time with a group of youth together there. So we can, because one of the things Sherelle stressed with me was, and I know Tori on your recent conference talked a lot about youth voice, and Sherelle has been very clear. We want youth voice. We want to hear from the youth that are being served, what's most beneficial and important to them. So that's where the focus groups really come into play, making sure that the youth have opportunity to express that as well. And then from there, I'll be providing a feedback document for Sherelle and Michelle so that they can use that to then work through the next phase of the grant process. So that's my big spiel. Any questions or anything that you're concerned about, like as you look at this plan, anything that you all as the professionals who do this every day are thinking, hey, Carigwin, you probably need to think about this, or have you thought about this? I am open to hear.
I'm just curious. I know some of us, we're a statewide organization. I think a few of us are, and there's so much variety in the places where people live. And I'm just curious how you factor that in.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so one of the things we talked about was I think that's part of why we really wanted to be able to do a virtual focus group, a couple of those, because originally our thought was we'll go to a few locations, but then that really kept us from being able to have interaction with youth across the states and different communities. So that's why we want to do a couple of virtual focus groups so that we can invite youth who maybe live in a more rural community where they're not necessarily, or they're just, you're serving different communities, you're serving different populations. And so we do want to make sure that we have opportunity to have a variety of youth participating, and it's not, just one urban center or one city represented. So one thing we have some questions. Melissa and I have some questions that we've developed for the parent and youth survey. One thing we did not do though was we haven't added information yet about like where families live. So that might be something, to your point, and we might need to make sure that we're identifying that. So we're making sure we're not only pulling in youth who live in rural communities or urban communities, but we're balancing that. Does that sound right to you? And does that get to the point of your question? Okay.
I wanted to mention that George and I are making a flyer for this. So we'll hopefully have that out by next week for signups so that you guys can spread that out to your families, specifically for the youth virtual sessions. And I apologize because right before Carigwin jumped on, I said that there was not a youth survey, and there is. So my apologies. For the youth that attend the in-person one, or the virtual one, we are paying them for their time. So we're doing $20 an hour. So for the virtual session, they'll get $30, and for the in-person, we're thinking $40. So how much ever time it takes, it's $20 per hour. So just putting that out there for youth too, that it is a paid opportunity for them. And that could be in gift cards so that they're not messing with any of their benefits or anything like that.
George, when you, as you hear the run through of the different steps that we're thinking about, knowing that knowing what your role is, we've never met before, but I know what your role is. Are there things that you think that I'm missing or that I need to consider? And this may come up more when we're starting to think about like the youth survey and the focus groups and stuff like that. But is there anything else you think I need to think about?
I don't think so right now. I think that once it gets put out there, there might be some things that you'll realize. I think it's different for every type of thing, and it's hard to get youth to be involved in that type of thing as well anyway.
Yep.
So I think putting it out and seeing what it looks like right when it happens is probably just the best bet right now, just to see.
Yeah. So let me ask you all this, because we did a military needs assessment, like I mentioned, and we did a survey through Peak for families in Colorado. It was a Colorado focused survey, and Pam, who was working with me from Peak on that project, said, Carignan, I'd be excited if we got 15 people to respond. And I mean, she's like, that'll be a big day. So what do you all think is realistic for parents and youth? Like, what are some numbers that you think I should be expecting or not expecting? Because I want to be realistic with this.
Yeah. I'll leave that open to you guys. I know I don't know. I know for the in-person one, I'm hoping to expect bigger numbers just because we're working with a school district in Denver, and they're being, like, we're sharing this, like, we'll get the word out. So
Okay.
I'm hoping that for our in-person session that we're going to see a lot of participation from our youth. But I also know that this is a new venture for Parent Center. So getting youth to participate it's not going to be an easier process. So for me, I'm like, if we get a couple of youth from each state, like, I'm like, yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
But you guys let me know too, like what's feasible. Cause I'm like, I know that getting surveys in general are already hard to get. So yeah.
And that's sort of another question. I'm sorry, I'm kind of a nerd, but like, how do you address the bias then when you have so few samples? And we tend to get people who have more engaged parents who may push them to do that. And so sometimes I don't think the people with less engaged parents get represented sometimes.
Yeah, Cheryl and I talked a lot about at the very beginning of this project about making sure that the underrepresented youth that you all serve are represented. And so like I said, I work with Big Brothers Big Sisters agencies. We've worked with agencies all over the country, similar to what you all have said. There are always certain families that are way more engaged, certain volunteers way more engaged, just like you all have. And so that you all could probably say, oh, I know this youth is going to be there or this parent's going to respond because they respond to everything. But you have in mind potentially some youth who you want to respond or you want to be able to participate, who are who may not even find out about this opportunity. And I am wondering, just thinking about the parent and youth surveys, how we can make it more broad or reach more people. And do you have, like, when you think about that, do you have ideas or strategies? And we're not doing that right now. We're not doing it till May. So I think it's things for us to think about, but are there things that have worked across your region to reach different people who aren't always contacting you?
Well, I would say for us, some of this is about timing. And I kind of wish it was timed earlier because we just had our statewide transition to adulthood fair in the first week in March.
Okay.
So I had 100 youth as a captive audience in person that we could have gotten this in front of that, I mean, we might be able to, and also all 3 rounds of our work of art program for the spring, one wrapped up last night, one wrapped up last week. So my captive audience of youth are gone for a while, for at least in person. And so that may make it challenging. And to address Anne's question or comment as well, I mean, when we have those audiences, they represent a pretty broad range of communities, and not just, like I might have a couple of our school districts might still be doing some transition fairs. But so I might be able to get into a few of those, but then you're talking about just a handful within one school district, and it's not necessarily representative of the state.
Yeah.
Those are just comments.
Yep.
We'll do our best, but timing is a key factor.
Yeah. Angela, you mentioned that, you know, the captive audience factor is gone right now. Do you have, is there a time in the next few months when when is the time when that will happen again? It's not next year in March.
For youth, in the fall,
Okay.
our work of art round will be in the fall. We may be doing one virtual round this summer, and so that could get us a broad audience. And if so, that would be in August, July, August. So, but that doesn't mean that we won't. We could still push this out. We have contact information, and we can try to get it virtually. But as far as in person goes, those, at least for youth. Now with parents, that's a different story. We're engaging in person with all over, even in May. So yeah, but for youth, that's a hard nut to crack in the first place. So when we've got those audiences, transition to adulthood fair happens the first week in March every year. And then our own programs take place in the spring and the fall.
Okay.
So, and I'm in Idaho.
Okay. Yeah. And there's a couple questions in chat that Sherelle responded to. Jana mentioned consider partnering with more primarily youth serving organizations. Do you have ideas about which ones? Not so much.
Well, I was just thinking while we were talking, I was just typing in the chat. I was saying, hey, Dalton and George, tell us what youth are doing over the summer, you know, and where they're gathering and that kind of thing. I mean, we can think anecdotally, but I think you guys might be our resident experts on what kids are doing over the summer.
Well, from what I've seen so far, a lot of kids are still, I mean, from where I'm in California and Napa, a lot of them are staying home and like playing video games. It's kind of hard to reach out to all of them. You know, it's I think a lot of the sports numbers, like for going, we used to have Optimus basketball. And so that was, you know, a huge thing because it went all the way from elementary school level to, you know, seniors in high school could play. So, you know, we used to have that. And I think all those numbers had dropped down, you know, after school baseball programs have and stuff like that. So I think a lot more kids are, because of COVID there's still the factor of, you know, being scared to go out and stuff like that. The fear factor, I guess, is what to call it. They're kind of staying home. So it's hard. That's something that my director and I have kind of gone over, and how to engage with them when they're not seeming ready to be engaged with. So it's kind of a problem that I'm also dealing with.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think most of my interactions so far have been with youth online, playing video games with them. We have done a few in-person things, which I really enjoyed. We've partnered with, what's the name of when we went on that hike, Sherelle? I can't remember the name of who did it, but we do hikes. So we're planning on doing another one in May with youth. That's been kind of nice to actually kind of get out. And as far as I've heard from those families, when we met them as well, they were saying, you know, it's so nice to actually get out and do this hike, because it had been so long since they had left the house. But we're also planning bowling and things like that. But I would agree with Dalton that it is really hard to reach out, especially keeping touch with a lot of youth. Like I've had youth, because it's all been online interaction, that they can just drop off and I can never hear from them again. So it is really hard right now.
Yeah. So Jana mentioned if there's a gaming platform. Robin asked about social media posts. I'm hesitant on the social media posts, like the survey on the social media posts. only because we did that for the military needs assessment and we got all kinds of junk. So some bot was filling out survey responses and I was like, you clearly are not a military family and this is not real. And so Pam's saying to me, we're going to have 10 to 15 people and I'd be excited. And I was like, no, we got 300 responses. And then we went and looked at them. We were like, this is not real. And, but I do think there are ways, like thinking about youth on just sitting at home online. I know it's normal. And so if there are ways that we can encourage completion of the surveys, like, I don't know, Cheryl, we haven't talked about this at all. And I don't know if this is even an option, but are there ways that we could say, hey, you'll be entered into a drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card or something like that, that would at least get families and youth to participate. And I mean, I don't know if that's an option that we can maybe explore.
Yeah, I can definitely talk to Michelle. Do you
Okay.
guys think that would help with the completion? So Angela, Robin, Ceci, Dalton, George, Ann, yeah, because I think we can find some room in the budget for that.
I think it can help, although I was just involved with an organization that was doing an alumni survey and they gave pretty strong incentives and they didn't help. So I think there's a lot of lack of engagement out there. People are just kind of tired of a lot of this kind of stuff. So
yeah,
I'm sure it can increase, but we found it not to do what we thought it would. So.
Yeah. Well, and like George, when you mentioned the hike and people getting together and going outside, and I'm thinking, well, is there a way to, is there anything like that happening where there could be, before you leave for the hike, there's opportunity for people to, jump on a tablet and answer some really quick questions and provide some feedback. So that might, Cheryl, those might be some things we need to, as we get closer to that point, we could, if you all have ideas over the next few weeks, we can always think through that too. I think we just need to, we're not going to be reliant on the youth surveys as the way that we develop what we're going to talk about in the focus groups, because we know we might not get tons of responses, but I'm also super sensitive to and like you said, the bias that can be created based on who completes it, but also the lack of inclusion that could be happening depending on who is or is not, while completing the surveys and in the focus group. So I'm sensitive to that too.
All right.
Okay.
So we're about 15 minutes over, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But Caribbean, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Putting the survey in the link, or do you want me to send it out?
I will. So I'll put the survey in the chat, or the survey link in the chat right now. And then let me drop that here. So you all can grab that. And then Cheryl, I don't know how many people, like how many staff members you're hoping completed, if it's, the group that's on the call, or if you want it to be a broader group.
Yeah, I'm going to send it out to the broader group.
Great.
So yeah.
Okay.
And
all right,
Cheryl,
everybody.
do you want multiple people within a center or just like one response per center?
I'm good with lots.
Yeah.
I say the more, in my mind, the more the better.
The one incentive per center.
Oh.
I mean, what the centers get doesn't matter what the number who fill them out. They don't get more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no. Oh no.
Just one.
Oh wait. Actually, could we multiply that?
No, and
look at Ken, every staff member.
Thank you guys so much. We'll be in touch, more details to come, but thank you for showing up. Thanks, Ceci, for your presentation, and we'll see you guys next week, hopefully.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.